Hello and welcome to this, the 6th chapter of Chapter 6 of the Amazing Maurice and his educated rodents. We begin this chapter with a page from Mr. Bunsey. Are you shocked? We are now officially at the end of this chapter. We will be halfway through this book because there are 12 chapters. You have made it halfway with me if you have been listening. Yay. And the page from Mr. Bunsey has an adventure reads, "There were big adventures and small adventures. Mr. Bunsey knew you didn't get told what size they were going to be before you started. Sometimes you could have a big adventure even when you were standing still. I wonder how big this adventure will be. It certainly seems like it might be pretty big. Because these rat catcher guys, they're obviously up to something, right? I'm going to attempt. It will not be the same voice as it was before because I suck. But I will be doing a girl voice for Melissa. And it will be girly. And that's how you will tell it is her. Hello, it's me. See? That's totally different from the voice I'm doing now. Hello, it's me, and I'm going to give the secret knock now. There were 3 knocks on the stable door, and then Melissa's voice rose again with, "Hello, did you hear the secret knock?" "Perhaps you'll go away if we keep quiet," said Keith in the straw. "I shouldn't think so," said Maurice. He raised his voice and called out, "We're up here!" "You've got to give the secret knock," shouted Melissa. "Oh, perhaps," said Maurice under his breath. Fortunately, no human knows how bad a swear word that is in cat language. Melissa climbed up the ladder. She was in all black, with a black scarf covering her hair and a big bag slung from her shoulder. Melissa says Maurice is not a proper talking cat, as he doesn't have boots and a sword or a hat. "I don't do clothes," he said, which was probably better than "you're loony." Melissa announces that it's almost dark. "Let's go. We'll move like cats." No cats ever moved like Melissa. She obviously thought that it was no good looking inconspicuous unless people could see that you were actually being inconspicuous. People in the street stopped to watch her as she slid along walls and scuttled from one doorway to another. Maurice and Keith strolled along after her. No one paid them any attention. She stopped in a narrow street at a big black building. The sign over the door showed rats with their tails together, making a star of rats. One of the most significant things about the door below the sign was the padlock holding it shut. Odd, Maurice thought. If rats made your leg explode, why do rat catchers have a big lock on their shed? Melissa is prepared for this. She reaches into her big bag, which gives off sounds of lumps of metal and bottles being moved around as she lists the things in her bag. Grapple, rope ladder, big and small medicine kits, knife, other knife, sewing kit, the signal mirror, and this. She pulls a roll of black cloth out. Maurice guesses them to be lockpicks. "Hairpins," said Melissa, selecting ones. "Hairpins always work in the books I've read." Maurice felt a chill at the back of his head. "And how come you know so much about picking locks?" "I told you. They locked me out of the room to punish me." Maurice had seen thieves at work. Men breaking into buildings at night hated to see dogs, but they didn't mind cats. Cats never attempted to tear their throats out, and what thieves tended to have, he knew, were complicated little tools which were used with great care and precision. They didn't use stupid click. "Good," said Melissa in a satisfied voice. "That was just luck," said Maurice as the padlock swung free. He looked up at Keith. "You think it's just luck too, right, kid?" Melissa pushed the door open. "Oh no," she moaned. "I didn't expect this." Somewhere below, Maurice's pause. and about a street away, the one local rat that the changelings had found alive was crouched in front of Dangerous Beans. The squads had been called back. This was not turning out to be a good day. Traps that didn't kill, Darktan thought. You found them sometimes. Sometimes humans wanted to catch rats alive. Darktan didn't trust humans who wanted to catch rats alive. Honest traps that killed outright, well, they were bad, but you could usually avoid them, and at least there was something clean about them. Live traps were like poison. They cheated. Dangerous Beans was watching the newcomer. It was strange, but the rat who could think the most unrat-like thoughts was also the best at talking to kikis. Except talking wasn't the right word. No one, not even Ham and Pork, had a sense of smell like Dangerous Beans. The new rat certainly wasn't giving any trouble. For one thing, it was surrounded by rats who were big and well-fed and tough, so its body was respectfully saying "sir" as hard as it could. "She was in a box," said Darktan, who was drawing on the floor with a stick. "There's a lot of them there." "I got caught in one once," said Ham and Pork. "Then a female human came along and tipped me out over the garden wall. Couldn't see the point of it." "I believe some humans do it to be kind," said Peaches. "They get the rat out of their house without killing them." "Didn't do her any good anyway," said Ham and Pork with satisfaction. "I went back the next night and whittled on the cheese." "I don't think anyone is trying to be kind here," said Darktan. "There was another rat in there with her, at least part of a rat in there with her. I think she'd been eating it to stay alive." "Very sensible," nodded Ham and Pork. "We found something else," Darktan said. He'd drawn lines and squiggles in the dirt. He shows them on the map. Ham and Pork doesn't need maps, he has his nose. Where the kind traps were. He sniffed around a bit there and smelled rats. Lots of rats. Alive, all in one place. Dangerous Beans got closer to the rat and sniffed. The rat sniffed him. The waiting changelings are astonished to see him treating a kiki as an equal. Human, many rats, fear, lots of rats, crowded, food, rat. There's something else, something odd, strange. She's really scared. "She's been in a trap," said Peaches. "And then she met us." "Much worse than that. She's frightened of us because we're strange, but relieved because we're not what she's used to." They guess at what it might be, but all the rats can gather is that it's something different, something new. They discuss for a while what to do with her now. If they let her go, she will die. If she stays and she eats, she eats their food, and she's just a kiki anyway. "It can't think," said Ham and Pork. "Nor could we not long ago," snapped Peaches. "We were all like her." "We think now, young female," said Ham and Pork, his hair rising. "Yes," said Dangerous Beans, quietly. "We can think now. We can think about what we do. We can pity the innocent one who means no harm, and that's why she can stay." Ham and Pork's head turned sharply. Dangerous Beans was still facing the newcomer. Ham and Pork reared up instinctively, a rat ready to fight, but Dangerous Beans couldn't see him. Peaches watched the old rat with concern. He'd been challenged by a weedy little rat who would not last a second in a fight, and Dangerous Beans hadn't even realized he'd made the challenge. The other rats were watching Ham and Pork, waiting to see what he would do. But it was dawning even on Ham and Pork that pouncing on the white rat would be unthinkable. It would be like cutting off his own tail. He very carefully let himself relax. "It's just a rat," he muttered. "But you, dear Ham and Pork, are not. Will you go with Darktan's crew and find out where she came from?" Ham and Pork declares himself not afraid of anything, repeatedly. Dangerous Beans turned to face him. In the candlelight there was a glow in his pink eyes. Ham and Pork was not a rat who spent a lot of time thinking about things he couldn't see or smell or bite. But he looked up. The candlelight made big rat shadows dance on the wall. Ham and Pork had heard the younger rats talking about shadows and dreams and what happened to your shadow after you died, but he didn't worry about that stuff. Shadows couldn't bite you. There was nothing to be frightened of in shadows, but now his own voice in his head told him, "I am frightened of what those eyes can see." He glared at Darktan. "I'll go, but I'll lead the expedition. I'm senior rat here." "This is fine," by Darktan. "Mr. Clicky is going to be going first anyway." Ham and Pork objects to this, and they argue. "I'm telling you that there's a couple of things about these new traps that I don't understand, and until I understand them, I very respectfully suggest you leave it all to me." "That's no way to speak to a superior rat." Darktan gave him a look, and Peaches held her breath. This is the showdown, she thought. This is where we find out who is leader. And then Darktan said, "I'm sorry. Impertinence was not intended." Peaches picked up the astonishment amongst the other males who were watching. Darktan, he'd backed down. He hadn't leapt, but he hasn't cowered back either. Ham and Pork's fur settled. The old rat was at a loss to know how to deal with this. All the signals were mixed up. "Obviously, as leader, you should give orders," said Darktan. "But my advice, sir, is that we investigate this. Unknown things are dangerous." "Yes, certainly," said Ham and Pork. "Yes, indeed. We will investigate, of course. See to it. I am the leader. That is all I am saying." Maurice looked around the rat-catcher's shed. "It looks like a rat-catcher's shed," he said. "I was expecting something horrible yet interesting. A ghastly clue. She decides they have to look for a secret passage." "What does a secret passage look like?" asked Keith. "It doesn't look like one, of course." "Well," said Maurice, "in that case I see dozens of secret passages. Doors, windows, that calendar, that cupboard, that rat hole, that desk." "You're just being sarcastic." "Actually, I was being flippant, but I can do sarcastic if you'd like." Keith stared at the long bench. Traps were piled up on it, all kinds of traps, and beside him all kinds of poisons. Row after row of battered old tins. He leaned in closer to study one of the labels. Sugar. "You might try to be some help," said Melissa. "I don't know how to find something that doesn't look like the thing I'm looking for," said Keith. Melissa brushed the hair out of her eyes. "This isn't working." "Do you suppose there might not be a secret passage?" asked Maurice. Even he leaned back from the force of Melissa's stare. "There has to be a secret passage, otherwise there's no point. Of course, we're doing it wrong. Everyone knows you can't find a secret passage by looking." She begins leaning nonchalantly on various things. Maurice looks to Keith for help. He's human. He should know how to deal with something like Melissa. But Keith just wanders around staring at things, and Melissa just keeps leaning on stuff. After a while, Keith says, "I don't think you'll find it that way." "Oh, won't I? Well, at least I'm being constructive about things. Where would you look if you're such an expert?" "Why is there a rat hole in a rat-catcher's shed?" Melissa glared at him. Then a look of concentration wrapped around her face. "Yes, that works. It's usually the stupid-looking person who comes up with a good idea by accident." She crouched and peered into the hole, pressing the little lever she found there. There was a clunk under the floor. Part of it swung back, and Keith dropped out of sight. "Oh, yes," said Melissa. "I thought something like that might happen." We rejoin the rats, as Mr. Clicky finds another trap. Mr. Clicky had his ears chewed off by young rats and his tail chopped off by a trap, but he had an advantage. Traps could never kill him because he wasn't alive. They had found Mr. Clicky in a pet store in Quirm, which appears in Snuff and Raising Steam, which are two more Discworld books, if you're wondering. There were rubber ones named Mr. Squeaky, but the sound when the trap shut upset everyone. No one cares what happens to a Mr. Clicky. Ham and Pork complains about how long this testing ground stuff is taking. Darktan encourages him to go on ahead. "I am the leader." Darktan. "Yes, sir. I'm sorry, we're all a bit tired." "This is not a good place, Darktan," said Hammond-Pork wearily. I've been in some bad root holes, and this is worse than any of them. What was that word that Dangerous Beans invented? Evil, said Darktan. Watching the squad drag the traps out of the walls, he could see the mangled wheels and springs in the jaws. I couldn't quite understand what the rat was going on at the time, but now I think I can see what he meant. Darktan orders that Peaches and Dangerous Beans are to remain in the tunnels behind them, come no further. The expedition moves forward, cautiously, as the tunnel opens up into a large old drain. Here the steam hissed from ancient pipes, and weak green light came from a street grating further down the drain. The place smelled of rats, freshly of rats. There was a rat there, nibbling on a tray of food. It glanced at the changelings and fled. "Get after it!" Hammond-Pork yelled. "No," said Darktan. A couple of rats who'd begun to chase the Kiki hesitated. "That was an order I gave," roared Hammond-Pork, turning on Darktan. The trap expert made a very brief crouch and said, "Of course, but I think the view of Hammond-Pork in possession of all the facts will be different to the Hammond-Pork who just shouted because he saw a rat run away. Sniff the air." Hammond-Pork's nose wrinkled. "Poison." "Grey number 2, said Darktan. "Foul stuff." Hammond-Pork looked both ways along the pipe. It went for a long way, and was just high enough for a human to crawl along it. "It's warm here." "Yes, sir," said Peaches. "They pump water from the hot springs into their homes." "Why?" "To bath in, sir." Hammond-Pork didn't like the idea. Darktan, on behalf of Hammond-Pork, ordered the poison buried, whittled on, and marked. He pulled a long, thin piece of metal from his web of tools. "What the crook is that?" Hammond-Pork asked. Darktan swished it backwards and forwards. "I got the stupid-looking kid to make this for me." "That's a sword. From Mr. Bunsey has an adventure." "That's right. I never believed in that stuff," grumbled Hammond-Pork. "A spike is a spike," said Darktan calmly. He suggested that, as they were now closer to the rats, a small team carry on. "Himself? Sardines?" "And me," said Hammond-Pork, glaring. "Of course." So that was quite an exciting chapter. We have leadership challenges and drama happening amongst the fun of an adventure. Thank you for listening. Thank you to me while I'm editing this. I will see you soon with chapter 7. More than halfway. Isn't it exciting? Anyway, thank you. Bye.